Well, yes, Allie referenced Jesus coming into Jerusalem, so this is Palm Sunday. That's when that happened. So this is the beginning of a Holy Week. Sometimes it's called Passion Week, and that always confused me until I understood that the word passion actually means suffering. And so it's a week where we reflect on the suffering of Jesus, but also it's a week where we can reflect on our own suffering and learn from Jesus' suffering for our own life. You know, thankfully, Jesus' suffering validates our own suffering, right? Because he suffered, it tells us that suffering is a part of the human experience. That's just something that we all experience at some time. And at the end of the week, we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, which shows us that God provides a way out of our suffering, which is good news, which is what we look forward to. And that's what I want to talk about us. That's what I want to talk about. So over the last few weeks, we've been reflecting on suffering, and I've given it a name, calling it Exile. And if you are new to this series, just give me a minute. I just want to define that for you. Literally, exile means when you are driven out of your country to live in a foreign land. But exile can happen on a personal level, and that's what we've been focusing on over the last few weeks. Whenever life throws you a curve and you end up in a place that you never imagined you'd ever be, that's exile. Exile is about experiencing a loss, a failure, some kind of a personal setback. It's a lonely place, it's a confusing place, and you wonder, what is going on with your life? And will I have a future on the other side of this? So over the past 2 weeks, I've given you a couple examples from the Bible, from the Old Testament specifically, of people in exile using Moses and Abraham. And today I want to offer you some steps, or you could call it a roadmap, to help you to return from your exile that you're experiencing, because I don't want any of you to get stuck in exile, and that happens. I can't give you a timeline for your return. It's different for everybody, and God really determines the timeline, but you can facilitate your return by taking the steps that I'm going to lay out for you today. So I've got 7 steps for you to consider. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one, but enough to send you in the right direction. Now, I mentioned the first step last week when I was talking about people in exile. We were looking at Psalm 107. And the first step is simply to turn to God. Psalm 107 talks about a person in exile, and then it makes this comment. It says, they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. Turning to God might seem like the obvious thing to do. Like, well, that's a no-brainer. Of course we're going to turn to God, but not everyone does. In fact, when people go through an exile, they often turn away from God. And they shut down because something bad happened to them, and they weren't expecting that. They thought God would protect them from that, so they feel abandoned by God. They feel that God can't be trusted. But the Bible's clear that God never abandons us, right? We never leave the palm of his hand. He walks with us during the hard times. The poem Footprints in the Sand says it well. I'm sure you've read it, seen it someplace. It's on someone's wall, might be on some of your walls. But it's worth repeating because it tells of a woman who dreams that she saw 2 sets of footprints in the sand representing God walking with her all throughout her life. But there were a few sections where there was only 1 set of footprints. And she realized that those seasons in her life were the toughest, the hardest times in her life. And so the woman asked God why he would leave her during those times. And God said, I would never leave you during the hard times. When you saw only 1 set of footprints, that's when I carried you. And so the first step is that you want to invite God to walk with you in your exile, and remember that he never leaves you. He never leaves you. Second, if you want to return from exile, you want to name it. You want to name your loss. A few years ago, I suddenly had a physical problem that couldn't be diagnosed. And I felt increasingly lightheaded, and I got more and more depressed. I went to my doctor a couple times and checked me out, did the blood tests, couldn't find anything wrong with me, sent me back home. But it kept getting worse, and there were times when I just felt like crying for no reason at all. And it got so bad that I had to preach sitting down. Interestingly, it always got better during the summer, and mysteriously, it would come back during the fall. Well, after 3 years of this, I read about seasonal affectiveness disorder. Maybe some of you suffer from that. But that's when you don't get enough sunlight during the winter months. And it causes a variety of symptoms that I was experiencing. So I asked my doctor if he thought that, could this be it? Do you think this could be it? We've been looking at this thing for 3 years. He says, well, who knows? Why don't you buy one of those happy lamps? You sit in front of the lamp, and maybe it'll work. And so that's what I did, and sure enough, that was it. It was a simple answer. And I still do that. I did it this morning every day through the winter. I do it. But my point is that I had to name my condition before I could solve it, right? I needed to have a name for it so I could treat it. So I've given you a name for your situation, calling it Exile, so that you'll realize, oh yeah, this is a thing. This is a thing that people experience in the Bible. This is a thing that we all experience. And another name for it, other than exile, is simply grief. It's grief. There's a book in the Bible called Lamentations, and it was written by the prophet Jeremiah, and he was lamenting the destruction of Jerusalem. And he does a good job of naming the loss. So let me read just a couple verses to you from chapter 1 and chapter 2, Lamentations. He says, Jerusalem was once full of people, but now the city is empty. Jerusalem once was a great city among the nations, but now she's like a widow. She was like a queen of all the other cities, but now she is a slave. My eyes fail from weeping. I am in torment within. My heart is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed, because children and infants faint in the streets of the city. You see, he named his loss. He named not only what happened to Jerusalem, he named what was happening inside of him, how he felt about Jerusalem. And it's important for us to do the same thing. Let me just give you an example for what it might look like in your life to name these two things. One, I'm angry because our leaders let us down. I'm angry the churches keep failing me. I'm fearful because I could lose a community that I love. I'm depressed because there's nothing I can do to change my circumstances. You see, you want to name not only what happened, but what's going on inside of you, so you can bring all of that to God and let him show you how you can work your way through it. But once you identify your loss, once you name it, the next step is to grieve it. You want to grieve the loss. Grief is much more than just an emotion. Grief is a process that's going to take you some time. I think that's one of the first things I identified here when I came. I said, you're grieving right now. This is grief. This is what grief looks like. So grief is a process that takes time, and it's so important that you understand the process and that you respect the process, that you make sure that you go through the whole process rather than try to just get to the end and put it all behind you. So to grieve means to identify a loss and allow yourself to cycle through the natural emotions that come your way. And you cycle through them until you reach a place of acceptance. And I think it's important to realize that even once you reach acceptance, you may dive back in and experience some of those emotions, and then you come back to acceptance again. And over time, you spend more time in this place of acceptance than going back into those emotions. So if you ever get to a point where you're feeling, I think I'm okay, I think I'm over this, and then you wake up the next morning and you're depressed, that's natural, that's normal. So I'm just alerting you to that. I think grieving is a lost art for most Americans. We haven't been trained on it. Some cultures have traditions that help them through their grief, but we tend to just deny our losses and hope that they magically go away at some point. Jewish culture has a grieving process, and we can learn from them. They're not afraid to express their pain. So let me give you another example from the book of Lamentations. Jeremiah said this. He said in chapter 1, he said, "Is any suffering like my suffering that was inflicted on me, that the Lord brought on me in the day of his fierce anger? This is why I weep and my eyes overflow with tears. No one is near to comfort me, no one to restore my spirit. My children are destitute because the enemy has prevailed." And you might read something like this and you go, man, this is so negative. I mean, if God is in your life, shouldn't you be more positive? Well, no. Not at first. I think it's really important to start by being honest with yourself and with God and even with others. Jeremiah, he refused to sugarcoat what had happened. And he wrote a whole book about how he felt about it, about his sorrow. You know, I've sat with a lot of people in pain through the years, and the last thing a grieving person wants to hear is someone walking into the room and quoting some Bible verses, trying to make them happy, trying to put a positive spin on everything. And you can just see the person shut down when that happens. I'm sure it's happened to all of us. So if you need to cry, you should cry. If you need to vent your anger, vent it. Just don't hurt anybody. Don't vent it at anybody. Don't break anything. But you can speak it. If you need time alone, take it. Expressing your pain is a natural part of the grieving process. God can handle it. He appreciates the honesty. Not everyone does, but God appreciates the honesty. See, God's not looking for fake smiles. He's not looking for a stiff upper lip when he knows that your heart has just been ripped in two. And you need to appreciate what's happened to you and not move on too quickly. If you try to keep all your pain bottled up, it's gonna cause problems for you later on in life. Okay, the fourth step toward returning from exile is to learn from it. I recently heard a saying that goes like this: if you have to walk through hell, make sure you take something from it. If you have to walk through hell, make sure you take something from it, meaning learn from the troubles that you were just in. If you leave your exile without learning anything, it's a wasted experience. So you want to ask God, what do you want me to learn from this? Here I am. You know, I'm open. Teach me. God, what is it about myself that I need to learn? What is it about other people that I need to learn, good and bad? What is it about you, God, that I need to learn? Job understood this. The book of Job tells of how he was stripped of everything valuable to him. He had his own personal exile his own personal exile experience, and out of that he concluded this. Job chapter 12, verse 22 says, God reveals mysteries from the darkness and brings the deep darkness into light. God reveals truth to us in dark places, and I came across something that Oswald Chambers said that draws this out a little bit more. He said, at times God puts us through the discipline of darkness to teach us to heed him. Songbirds are taught to sing in the dark, and we are put into the shadow of God's hand until we learn to hear him. Are you in the dark just now in your circumstances or in your life with God? When you are in the dark, listen, and God will give you a very precious message for someone else when you get into the light. So make sure you listen to what God has to say to you during this season. Fifth step on the return from exile is to reframe your loss. To reframe it. Reframing has to do with how you view your loss. Reframing helps you to see things from God's perspective rather than from your human and sometimes negative perspective. So consider this picture. I hope the pixels came out okay. There's a picture coming up here, I hope. Yeah, it looks pretty good. All right, so consider that picture. You can frame that picture in two different ways. And let me see how this next came out. Oh, great. So you can frame it as a beautiful sunset. You can frame it as a terrible lightning storm. It's up to you. It's your choice. That's why I told you the stories about Moses and Abraham over the past couple of weeks. I wanted to frame those stories in a way that would help you to see that exile was used by God for these two men to do great things. It was the prerequisite. It's what came before them doing great things for God. They had to go through their wilderness experience. Again, in the book of Lamentations, Jeremiah does an amazing job of reframing the destruction of Jerusalem. I read the first few lines of Lamentations a couple minutes ago, but there are 5 chapters, and if you read through it, it's like the most depressing book in the whole Bible. It's all about complaint. It's all about mourning, and he ends with these negative words. He says, chapter 5, why do you always forget us? Why do you forsake us for so long? Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old, unless you have utterly rejected us and are angry with us beyond measure. So based on the open of his book and the close that I just read of the book, you'd think that Jeremiah framed the destruction of Jerusalem as in totally negative terms. The book seems to have nothing good to say, no hope to offer. But there's something interesting about the way that the book is written that many people fail to see, and I want to point that out to you. Jewish poetry is often written in a way that highlights the main point. It's almost like a secret code. You've got to know the code. And the casual reader would miss it. Like I said, you'd read through the book and go, this is the worst book in the Bible. Why is it even here? But ancient writers would often put their main point in the middle of a paragraph, or in this case, in the middle of a book. Okay? So let me show you what I mean. Lamentation starts and ends with lament. But at the very center of the book, in chapter 3, Jeremiah tells what he learned to be true about God. And you've heard these words quoted before, but maybe you didn't know the context. He said, my soul is downcast within me, yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. So the first 3 chapters, lament. The last 3, or 2.5 chapters, I should say, 2.5 chapters, lament. The last 2.5 chapters, lament. And right in the middle, great is your faithfulness. That's the main point. And every Jewish reader would have seen that. So out of all of Jeremiah's pain came these incredible words of both faith and hope. Jeremiah was able to reframe his experience and say that even in exile, God was there. And Jeremiah understood that there are lessons that we can learn in exile that you won't learn in any other place. Exile is where you learn about the faithfulness and the mercy of God, and maybe that's why God's people were so often in exile, because they needed to learn that. So as you think through your losses, as you work through your grief, consider how you might reframe your experience to see the faithfulness of God. Next step, if you want to return from exile, is to forgive your offender or offenders, and that might even include yourself at times. Exile often happens when someone offends us. They take control of our lives for a moment and cause a loss in our lives that causes deep hurt. And when that happens, we can easily think that having anger and resentment towards that person will win back our control and keep it from ever happening again. So it seems like a very useful tool, anger. We refuse to forgive until or unless they fulfill our demands and put things right. Like, I'm going to be angry until you change things and put things right. But instead of taking back control, our resentment often gives them more control. And that's because as long as we think that they owe us something, we're going to feel obligated to be angry toward them and resent them. And this only prolongs our time in exile. And I'm telling you, a lot of people get stuck there. I think we've all met old, angry, bitter people. And you don't want to be that. What we really need is to be free from our offender. Forgiveness is what gives us that freedom. The author and the theologian Lewis Smedes He once said this: to forgive is to set a prisoner free, and then to discover that that prisoner was you. You set yourself free by forgiving. Forgiveness doesn't excuse the offense. A lot of people don't forgive for that reason. They're afraid that they're going to imply that they are excusing it. No, forgiveness simply frees you from the need to provide payback to your offender. It enables you to close the book on the past and focus on the future, on the present and the future. See, it's bad enough that your offender threw you into exile, messed with your life. You don't want to give them any more space in your brain with your anger and your resentment. Well, finally, if you want to return from exile, you want to make a heroic choice. When God's people left Egypt, they passed through the wilderness in just a matter of days, and they came up to the border of the promised land. They could have entered at that time, but they chose not to. They didn't make a heroic choice. And as a result, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. My point here is that there are different paths that you can take when you're in exile, different choices that you can make. You can choose the path that I've been outlining for you this morning, or you can play the victim, always complaining and pointing the finger at whatever or whomever may have caused you to go into exile. But that won't change anything. And like I've been saying, it's only going to keep you in exile. Instead, if you want to make a heroic choice, you want to live out a good story, something that you can be proud of, and say, well, I did well. I handled that well. Author John Trent, he wrote this about making choices. He said, if we want our lives to tell strong and compelling stories in which the characters grow into people of blessing, then we, the characters, have to make choices. Choices that are sometimes difficult, choices that are sometimes painful, choices that are sometimes critical where something important is at stake. Friends, you're in that place right now. You need to make some choices, and I hope they're heroic choices. Let me give you an example. Imagine going to a movie where the protagonist, that is the main character, experiences a tremendous loss. I see that Tom Cruise is coming out with a new Mission Impossible, so let's imagine Tom Cruise in this idea of mine, this imagination. So after Tom experiences some dramatic loss, he's trapped in an impossible situation. He's hanging from a cliff. He's facing certain death. Time is running out. The clock is ticking. You know what I'm talking about? Imagine that he spends the rest of the movie complaining about it and giving in, resigning himself to the inevitable. Just throws up his hand and goes, well, I guess I'm just going to die. It's not a very good story. That's not why you pay the big bucks to go see Mission Impossible. No, you want to see him face the challenge, overcome his loss, beat the bad guy, and rescue the girl, right? That's why you go to those movies, because he makes heroic choices. And so the question is, will you make a heroic choice and live a life that tells a good story? A story that will hold people's attention if it was a book or if it was a movie. A story that people feel good about when they walk out of the theater or they put down the book when it's all over, because you met the moment by making a heroic choice. You did what needed to be done to get your life back on track and to bring glory to God. You see, it's so important that you don't let exile define you or determine your future. You don't want this to be a setback for you. You want your exile to propel you into a better future. And that can happen if you give it to God. So take responsibility for your life and your decisions and invite God to help you tell a good story. A story that glorifies His name. Well, I hope these steps help. I know some of you are going through some counseling right now, and I think that's all a part of the learning process. But I think this might be a good roadmap for you to just check in and see if you're walking through these steps to make sure that you find your way out of exile. Let me pray for us. Father, in the middle of heartache, Jeremiah was able to say, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. So, Father, be with us today in our exile. Fill us with hope and thanksgiving. Reveal yourself to us and show us the path out of exile. And give us the patience for your timetable. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Worship team came back up, and I asked them to play a song just to reflect on the faithfulness of God.
You guys are welcome to stand, sit, however you want to worship and reflect with the Lord. That is totally okay. The important piece is opening your mind and heart to what God has to say.
The goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is
my first point, I mentioned that sometimes when bad things happen, people run away from God. So I had a picture in that song when we were singing about His goodness running after us. If you're one of those people that runs away from God during hard times, maybe you just need to stop, let Him catch up, let His goodness catch up to you so you can experience His goodness. We've got a benediction for us, but it'll be at the end of our meeting. So we're going to give you a break here until 10:15. I don't even know what time it is right now, but until 10:15. And then parents, if you have children, if you could pick them up right now, that would be wonderful. So we'll just let you go, I think. Are there donuts? There's no, well, there's bagels. I thought there might be donuts too, but there are bagels, of course. Always bagels. So God bless.